Hello and welcome to the FEZ show. It is Monday the 4th of May 2020 and we will be reviewing the second round of the Race at Home Challenge from Electric Docks or the Leicester Special Edition Formula Retrack. Remember, if you're enjoying the content, remember to hit that like button and also hit that subscribe button. Joining me on today's show, as usual, is Jack Pickering and Edward Hunter. Morning, boys.
Good morning.
Hello there.
Good morning. It's great to have you back. Obviously, did you have nice weekends?
Yeah, it was good. Didn't get up too much, but yeah, it was good.
Well, aside from doing editing and stuff, not just for this show, obviously, but for other things, I was watching the esports stuff again, as you say, at Leicester slash Electric Dog slash whatever it's called this week in the new poll, Tracky McTrackface, maybe it'll be called next time when we inevitably revisit it where it's wet.
Yeah, well, that's very true, obviously, considering where we'll be going next week when we go back to Monaco in the rain. But, boys, I have to start. We predicted it on Friday. We predicted it. Crash Fest. And, oh my God, was it a crash fest. It was just littered with crashes, Jack. And some spectacular, some not so spectacular, some very silly, some not very silly. But the elimination process, we said this when we said that the damage model would be at 80%. And, we wouldn't need the elimination process if drivers make mistakes, because this is sim racing at the end of the day. They're not all pros at it, so therefore they will make mistakes. And when you have damage set to 80%, you can retire, and half the field ended up retiring. I think it was lap 11. Instead of lap 2 when we're supposed to have the first elimination, lap 11 was the first one with Oliver Rowland.
Yeah, I remember Nichols saying halfway through the race that we hadn't had a proper elimination yet. Yeah, I think this is something that we all saw coming. This is what happens when you have a really tight chicane for turn one. I was surprised that there wasn't more stuff, and I'll be honest. I actually missed the Van Dorn bit at the start. I was watching it. I just wasn't paying attention. But no, I think it was still a very good race. We saw and then later on in the race we saw the battle between Gunter and Bearline until Bearline bottled it. But it was still a very good race. Yes, the elimination format didn't really do anything, but yeah, I think it was a good race, but yeah, the elimination format wasn't necessary.
That's the thing, Ed. If you're going to have, obviously, damage on, like, for example, the F1 esports, obviously the pro driver did have damage on, but the F1 virtual GP does not have damage on. And obviously there was a lot of crashes in yesterday's race, and obviously they were able to continue. And obviously all of them finished. There's no elimination process in that series. But what I find, interesting is if we're going to have these crashes and we're going to go to try tight street circuits, and it's probably going to continue unless formally do a change of heart and we go and race on like proper open circuits. There's going to be crashes. These drivers, as great as they are, and they have been superb, I've been so surprised with the lap times that they've been doing on the tracks, and they've been, especially at Leicester, they were as quick as their pro sim racers, but at the same time, they're not professional sim racers. They don't have the same sensation going through the corners as they would do in real life. So mistakes are expected, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what we've been saying about the elimination format, I think what was the nickname they called it? It was Race Royale, which is supposed to be it's supposed to evoke, I guess, Battle Royale, and that's those sort of format of shooting games, basically. It feels to me like the whole elimination format is something that works a lot better in, say, a more arcadey or less realistic style of game, whereas in sim racing, it doesn't quite feel necessary, like you say, especially with the damage up to 80%, and at a track like Leicester, where the elimination tends to happen quite naturally in terms of you make a mistake, you're out, or you're so far back down that that's basically a race over, even without you being eliminated. So yeah, I agree in that sense.
The track though, Jack, was so hard. Like, I remember doing it last week. It was so easy to mix. It was wide, which is really uncommon for a Formula E track, it being so wide. But because of the track layout being so fast, like you ended up using that road or just completely understeering into the walls. And if you watch the race again, you'll see so many drivers just tapping the walls here and there, just hitting the wall. And if the damage, imagine the damage being on 100%, which they sort of said, at the beginning, once after the Monaco race, when there's basically no damage, we could have seen far more drivers retiring from crashes and far more big crashes.
Oh, 100%, pun intended. Yeah, there was, yeah, there would have been, a lot more crashes, a lot more retirements. But yeah, I think 80% is the correct thing. Is the correct thing at the moment, because it means that some like people like Van Dorn, who had an absolutely atrocious start, have can continue in the race. And actually, I think he finished P4, P5, somewhere around there. And so yeah, it was still a decent result for him. But yeah, the track was one of the problems, and the main chicane and the chicane was the big one as well. I reckon had they changed, they should have thought about it before they did it. So if they were going to have a chicane on that main straight, they should have had it before the start finish line in the pits. But that's just me. That's just me waffling. But yeah, no, I really like the circuit, even though but mainly because it was just so fast and flowing, and even though there weren't that many overtaking spots, it was still so cool to see Formula E cars go through sweeping S's.
Yeah, it's literally flat out, and it's scary as well. Like, as I said on Friday's show, like, you need to have big cojones in order to make sure you do that fast left right sweep before you get it was just like you're just daring. You bend, you try not to lift, you try not to brake too hard going into that section. So it requires full commitment, which was great. So I do think it was a good track. But Ed, something that we talked about on Friday or last Monday, whenever it was stuff that needs to be improved, and the coverage was one of them. And I'm gonna give my hats off to Formula E. They did improve the coverage. We talked about no replays. There were replays. We talked about not even having a lap count, so we knew where we were. There was a lap count this time. So I feel like there was good steps in the right direction for improving the actual coverage and the whole spectacle that the fan gets to enjoy.
Yeah, they even did a few minor things that we didn't badger them to do, like at the starting line, when the lights went out, they had this other green light graphic that came on the screen and then held for a few seconds before going away. So yeah, they did do little things like that, and arguably this is sort of what the test race should have been for, to figure this stuff out. But still, better late than never with the replays, especially.
No, it makes sense, and it's obviously good that they got the start, because hilariously in the F1 esports race that they missed the start. So mistakes can easily be made, but at least they're rectifying them slowly. So there were things that Formula E obviously just had to do, because last week's in Hong Kong, missing obviously Van Dorn's huge crash, Jack, and not knowing what happened. So it was a big step up, and they needed to make it, considering what the likes of F1 are doing and IndyCar and all the others that are out there. They needed to make that improvement.
Well, yeah, and they really did. They involved some replays for the first time. They had a lap count, so we knew what lap we were on, instead of the last 2 weeks where we've had to rely on Nichols just saying whatever lap we're on. But no, they made some good improvements. I'm still guessing on the fact that they're watching this show, because all the improvements are stuff that we all mentioned in the last week. So yes, hi everyone from Formula E. Thank you for watching. Yes, I think they did make some big improvements. There are some other things that they do need to improve on, but that's maybe not to be that's maybe not on the broadcast side, and maybe on the actual on the actual game side.
Yeah, for me though, still, the names, I don't understand. Like, if you look at IndyCars, for example, and obviously Formula One are using the Codemasters sort of format, so you can see, but it's still clear. I still don't think Formula E's names of where people are clear enough, if that makes sense, Ed. You know, they're still quite small. It's not, you know, if you compare that to Formula E's official, you know, list of names when we watch a race, it's tiny compared, like the gap between each. It looks like an Excel spreadsheet that hasn't actually been, you know, spread out at all.
Yeah, and I wonder if maybe that's because obviously they've had a lot more time to, you know, over several seasons to get the graphics in the most visually pleasing and easiest sort of way that kind of works for Formula E broadcasts. Whereas here, maybe they've sort of just, again, it's a consequence of them having coupled it together. And you'd think it'd be something they could work on in the future. But another thing I noticed, it's just more to do with the format than the broadcast, but they skipped the sim races qualifying. They went straight into the Formula E drivers qualifying, did the sim races race, and then the Formula E drivers race. And we never really got a recap of the sim races qualifying, which ended up being crucial because Peo Ped, who qualified on pole, won the sim races race from pole. So it would have been nice at least to see his pole lap, in my opinion.
Yeah, and that is an interesting thing that we're going to get onto very shortly, actually, about how they changed format. I thought that was interesting, but there is, you know, for me, there's a clear reason why, Jack, they did that. It's simply because of how it was a 1 minute 20 lap. So therefore, fitting everything in, the qualifying session, 2 race sessions, you know, it ran to schedule without the sim race qualifying session. So therefore, if we had the sim race qualifying session, then they would have had to have either started the event earlier or they were going to finish much later, which was been no good for Jack Nicholls and Dario Franchitti when they had commitments for the race, you know, literally 10 minutes after the E-race had finished.
Yeah, exactly. I think I see the reason why they ditched the sim racing qualifying this week. To be honest, I do occasionally, because I've got nothing else better to do in lockdown. I have got lots of uni assignments, can't be bothered. But I've been like I have been messing around in terms of like what would be kind of like the best format to do, because over the last few weeks we've discussed these other things of like maybe having a longer race in generals, and then so we have about like 5-10 laps until the elimination format starts. So yeah, I've been messing around with that, and yeah, and I have put the sim races qualifying to one side, so that the broadcast can go, so that the broadcast will go smoothly. But yeah, I think it's good that they recap the results of qualifying. I think, well, they needed to, otherwise we'd just go into the race thinking, what on earth's going on? But yeah, I think it's all dependent on the circuit, whether they show sim race qualifying or not. They're always going to show the drivers qualifying, but qualifying is nowhere near as important as the race. So as long as they show the race, everything's good.
Yep, and the first lap, so, you know, better than Formula 1 from yesterday. So, what I want to move on, just a quick race review, because obviously, Stoffel Van Dorn, again, 2 pole positions, but boy, he can't catch a break. Even in the F1 esports race, he couldn't catch a break. On pole for that as well. On pole, crashing at the first chicane, did it again on Sunday for the F1 esports race and completely lost it off on traction going, and it didn't damage his car, thankfully, because there's no damage in that race for F1 esports, but obviously fell down the order. Obviously massively damaged his car, Ed, for the Formula E race, and once again, driving the race like that for the whole full 15 laps and still able to get home in some decent points. I think he moved up. I think he was 4th in the end. So, you know, a decent result. He wasn't 4th, he was 5th.
That was it, yeah. And it was one of those things where you always think you're going to be clear until you clip the one bit of the chicane. It just bounces you into a wall on the other side, basically. And it's an easy thing to do. Funnily enough, I think Van Dorn dropped a few places and then climbed back up to 2nd briefly, because Andre Lotto, who was sort of the beneficiary of that, ended up spinning into the wall the lap after. So Van Dorn did get back onto the podium briefly before dropping behind a few other drivers whose cars were less encumbered by steering difficulties.
And then obviously, Jack, we had Andre Lotterer, who then was next to spin, obviously profited, went up into the podium, was doing really well, fighting with Pascal Wehrlein, and then he binned it at the turn 1 chicane, and then was, starting this sort of procession of drivers that started to bin it at that first chicane.
I'll be honest, I've kind of lost count of how many people and who actually went off. But one of them that I do remember that was quite race deciding was Pascal Wehrlein going off. I don't think it was actually the first chicane. I think it was at the final corner. He just went too deep and slammed into the wall.
No, it was the first chicane, Jay.
No, it was the first chicane.
Was it the first chicane? Okay.
Yeah.
And then for Max Gunther, it was just plain sailing. All you need to do is bring the car to the finish, and so yeah, it was a real race of attrition.
Yeah, and obviously Maxi Gunther, he wasn't the quickest driver. Pascal Wehrlein, for about 10 laps before he managed to smash it into the wall at turn 1 on lap 11, Pascal was on him. And Maxi Gunther, for the last 2 races, Ed, hasn't actually been the quickest driver. Stoffel Van Dorn probably has been the quickest driver over the last 2 events, obviously by getting the pole. So he's been the man really to beat, but he's beating himself at the moment. And Maxi Gunther, give him credit, the boy is super quick. But the key thing for sim racing, which everyone needs, is super consistency, and that is what he has.
Indeed, and I bet, Jack, you'll be hoping when they do the wet qualifying for Monaco that your super consistency wins out and gets you up from 57th place. But yeah, in the case of Maxi Gunther, it's really stood him in good stead. While those around him have lost their head, he has kept his. So that it has been really impressive. And of course, Maxi Gunther is really highly rated. I think we had him like 3rd or 4th in our top 5 Formula E drivers of the season so far for season 6, and we did that earlier this year. He was just behind Evans and Costa. Of course, he's beaten both of those in all the sim races so far because he's won all of them. So yeah, the only real thing is that he's not quite been able to the outright 1 lap pace over Stoffel Van Dorn. But you never know. We could see him really potentially dominate this championship in all the remaining races.
It's interesting to see, obviously, from then on, from the crash, obviously, Wehrlein went backwards. He really damaged his car, and then he was getting overtaken left, right, and centre. And he was pushed to the last point, from like Jean-Eric Vergne overtaking him at the final corner. So he went from 2nd, and they were nearly like 10 seconds clear at this stage, all the way down to 10th. So, the damage, it really affected him. But I suppose, in terms of the crashes, at least they were actual crashes and not forced crashes or not deliberate crashes, Jack, as we've also seen this weekend across the esports world.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, bold man to say that. Yes, there were some other incidents. Thankfully, none in Formula E, none as far as I'm aware in Formula 1. A few in IndyCar, and none in the race. But yeah, no, it was. Yeah, I'm not sure if we're gonna dabble on this incident for long, but yeah, I am disappointed in Simon Pagenaud for doing that. But yeah, that's all I really want to say on the matter.
Yeah, for those of you who obviously don't know, reference in the IndyCar race where they decided to actually deliberately crash into each other and sort of ruin the spectacle towards the end. But at least we didn't see that in Formula E. And half of our crashes at least were drivers actually getting it wrong. So boys, the last big topic that we want to talk about, and I think this, again, we've spoken about this now for ages, and I'm a still big believer of it, but at the same time, I can see it not happening. And that is a DLC for R Factor 2 with some official Formula E tracks. Now, let me go back to this, because we talked about the coverage earlier, and I think this is really important, that they cancelled the sim race qualifying session. Now, the track was 1 minute and 20 seconds. Now, if we go to a circuit like Silverstone, if we go to a circuit like Sao Paulo, if we go to a circuit like Malaysia, and I'm listing these tracks because these are actual tracks that R Factor 2 have created in the game, which you can download for free. There are tons of tracks on there, but some of them aren't actually made by R Factor 2, so therefore I don't see Formula E going to a circuit that's made by a mod. Zandvoort is also there, for example. So if it took us 1 minute 20 seconds to do that qualifying session effectively for round Leicester, imagine how long it's going to be around Zandvoort or around Silverstone or around Interlagos, for example. You're going to look at 1 minute 30 and even some close to nearly 2 minutes probably. So in terms of a broadcast side, I don't see them going to those tracks because it's going to take you probably won't have a chance to fit in the sim race if you're doing a 15-lap race. And I don't think energy management is on. I don't know. I haven't obviously seen. I think in the practice sessions that I've seen, there's no energy management, so like it stays at 100%. So I don't think during the race it goes down. I need to probably check Stoffel Van Dorn's VOD to double check that, but I can't remember seeing the energy management actually going down. So there won't be any energy management in those races, but the coverage, I think, is the huge one, is that it will take so long to fit in races, Jack. If we do go to Silverstone with Zandvoort, they won't be able to fit in everything that they want to get in.
No, and that's probably one of the reasons why they don't want why they don't want to go there. I think with the decision, because I am now going to bring this up because I am not happy with this decision. We're going to go back to Monaco, and it's going to be wet. Yay! What? Why are we going back to the same circuit, but only wet? Wow! Oh my God, it's amazing. No, it's why? Why are we going back to the same circuit, but wet?
But even in the test race, though, Jack, like there wasn't much overtaking. Monaco's such a hard track to overtake. There wasn't that much overtaking. There was obviously a lot of bashing and barging. So I reckon there's going to be quite a bit of damage anyway, even though it's in the wet, with drivers trying to overtake them anyway.
Yeah, and yeah, it's just going to make it even harder. And it's a circuit that we've been to, and I just don't see the point. And but the fact that they're going to these circuits do make me believe that we will end up at other official Formula E tracks, but I just don't see the point in like all Monaco but wet, Hong Kong but wet. Oh wow, that's going to make tons of difference. So yeah, I just don't get the point. I'm hoping that in the next couple of weeks they're going to finally say, right, okay, there's a DLC and it's coming out, because yeah, there's just no. I don't see the point in going back to a track that that we've been to before just because it's wet.
Because the thing is, right, if Formula E were to do that, now they're going back to Monaco, but they'd still have 2 tracks that they'd have to, fill, Ed. And I know you're not the believer of a DLC coming, but at the same time, we can't go back to the tracks that we've already done. It doesn't look great. You've got IndyCar going to tons of tracks because they can. You've got F1 going to tons of tracks because they can, because they've got all these tracks in these games that they're playing, whereas Formula E don't. Unless we go to a track that's very similar but no one's heard of, that is an R Factor 2 mod, for example, but again, I can't see that. So when you look at the coverage, I don't expect us to be going to tracks that, R Factor 2 have made, which is Zandvoort, Silverstone, Malaysia, and so forth, because they're just too long.
Yeah, and I wonder also if there might be licensing issues potentially in terms of especially using Formula One tracks, in terms of like if you put all the Formula E sponsor signage up.
Yeah. But I think that would be, it's a game at the same time, right? IndyCar went to Spa. IndyCar went to Motegi. These things don't happen. V8 supercars went to Monza and Spa. So maybe they just don't have to put Formula E sponsorship up for those races. I don't know if V8 supercars and IndyCar did, for example. But, if they went to those tracks, I can see Formula E potentially doing it, but I don't know if it'd be viable.
Yeah, I guess in terms of, and by the way, I just want to say I really loved how sarcastic Pico was being earlier about his enthusiasm for wet Monaco and revisiting all the tracks he's been to so far, but wet. But in terms of the DLC, I think my issue is that because we've heard from Jamie Regal in the virtual press conferences that basically admitting that this was all put together rather quickly, and that indicates to me that makes me think that if this has all been put together so quickly, how are they going to convince Studio 397 and R Factor to make all these accurate, up-to-date Formula E tracks in the space of a couple of weeks? Because I remember when the whole thing about Road to Vegas was they made the Vegas track in 4 weeks, and it was a rush job, and there were inevitably problems that came up as a result of that. So to me, And that, but of course, you know, that's a small modding team. Studio 397 is a much bigger sort of outfit, so I guess there's that in their defense. But for me, I think it's more of a time thing. And sure, maybe having these few weeks on the big already existing tracks gives them a bit more time. But for me, it still seems a little too. I think the whole problem exists, but mainly because Formula E spent 3 years not really doing anything with sim racing, and that was 3 years where they could have spent getting more official tracks in there, and now they're having to sort of catch up.
The thing is, though, I can't see where Formula E are going to go. Even if they were to repeat Hong Kong, Monaco, and the Leicester track again, we'd still have 2 races that we need to fill. And if there's not going to be a DLC, where are we going to go? Because if we do a 15-lap race, if we continue the format that they are using around Silverstone, unless they decide to reduce the laps, but then that would affect the elimination process and how many drivers are eliminated. You know, I can't see where else would Formula E go unless they bring in their own tracks, and bring in tracks like Paris, for example, maybe Seoul or London, depending on how long those tracks will be. So even though we haven't actually gone to those tracks, you know, that could have been, oh look, we've put the Seoul race, it goes through a stadium, it'll look great. London, obviously, there was talks as soon as London was announced if Studio 397 would do one, and the main mod guy actually spoke, who does mods all the Formula E tracks in R Factor 2, said, I will wait for R Factor 2 or Studio 397 to tell me, you know, is Formula E going to actually do an actual official track for London? Because if not, then obviously I will make it. But I can't see where else Formula E would go. We can't just repeat tracks, because it will just, by the end of the season, no one will be watching because people will be bored. Like, I've seen it. They want to see new content. That's the whole point of the internet, Jack, is you want to see new content, new things. And when you go back, even, you know, the wet race, as you sort of alluded to, doesn't really do much for anyone because we've been to Monaco. Just adding some rain, and obviously with Formula E cars having tyres that are all weather, it doesn't matter if it's raining. The car should still pretty much, you know, run as it should.
Yeah, Monaco is snow. It's final two races of the year, I think. Yeah, if they do repeat all of them with where I'm just gonna be not that invested in it. I'm gonna end up focusing more on the classic reruns that Formula One are putting out on Saturday afternoons at the same time. I think they need some new tracks. Maybe do Donny, because they were originally doing 1:30s at Donny, so they could do more or less the same as and actually that was Gen 1 Season 2, so they probably improved about another 5 seconds on that, so they'll probably be about the same times as we had on the one that we had, the circuit that we had on Saturday. Don't know what it's
Leicester.
Yeah.
A track with many names.
Yeah, Leicester. Leicester's near Donington Park, so yeah, pass it on the M1 going up there. So
Very true.
Leicester,
Very
Pico.
true.
Not that.
Very true.
I think they do need to do some different tracks, because I'm gonna be bored. I'm gonna be bored like in 2 weeks' time if they say Hong Kong in the rain. I'm gonna be bored.
Yeah, hopefully we'll find out. Hopefully, again on Thursday, we can ask the question about the tracks and what Formula E's plans are on Thursday, and see what they say, and then we can report back on Friday, considering, you know, what they will be doing. But boys, we're running out of time. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Cheers, Jack.
And remember, if you are enjoying the content, remember to hit that like button and that subscribe button. It helps us out massively. You've been watching the FEZ show. We will see you tomorrow. Goodbye.